evening, dear listeners and viewers. This is Desiree Rover with the Minority of One report. And that is a paraphrase on Gandhi's, even if you are a minority of one, the truth is still the truth. And I couldn't agree more. And we live in a time where the one lie is being followed by the next and the next and the next, and it goes ever faster. And I had a very simple solution. I just turn the news that I see on the television and in the radio, I turn it 180 degrees, and then I know more or less what is the truth. And tonight I have my beautiful friend and my beautiful guest, Leuren Moret again. She is a nuclear whistleblower. She is an anthropologist. She is a globetrotter. She went to places that I can only dream about, and also in combinations that are very interesting. And tonight we are going to talk about some subjects that are a bit controversial. Yeah, well, we can't help it, can we, Leuren?
It's not us who made it up, it's other people. Their actions and deeds speak louder than their words.
Yeah, exactly. First, I wanted to say that I also have a Dutch radio program on the internet, and I had a guest who's out of the blue, when I was speaking about the dangers of Fukushima, he suddenly said, yeah, but there is this one guy, Galen Windsor, and he on the internet has a film, you can Google his name, and then you see that nuclear power is perfect, and it is cheap, and it is this and that and the other. And I thought, what the heck? Because I remember the work of Dana Durnford, who looked in the tide pools in Canada and British Columbia. And he found that of the 5,000 plus species there that should be there, he finds only 10 to 15. So a big disaster is going on there. And then you had a comment on this Galen Windsor. And your own background is in the nuclear world also, so help me out here.
Well, from the beginning of the nuclear project, and that was by 1900, it had already started. The mechanisms for protecting the nuclear programs, making nuclear bombs, and nuclear energy, and those were the two applications from the very beginning, that over 115 years ago, that scientists knew those would be the two main pursuits for the use of energy that came out of the nucleus of the atom. And so everyone knew, and it was all very secret, but in the end, the template for the nuclear weapons program and the nuclear power program came from one source. And an Austrian chemical engineer named Fritz Hansberg took this template for a nuclear weapons program, and he's the one who was funded and sponsored by a Pittsburgh industrialist named Winter, Mr. Bauer Winter. Bauer was a family name, a middle name. And that is the name of the Rothschilds before Amstel Meyer took on the Rothschild name.
Yeah.
So all of these come from one template, and they were given by Fritz Hansberg to Germany, Austria, Russia, Japan, the United States, believe it or not, England. And so the nuclear weapons program came out of Vienna, and it came out of the Rothschilds, which means it's a Jesuit agenda and a Jesuit scheme and the design of it came from them. Now, along with this secret development, a whole network and a whole program of covering up and hiding these devastating effects of radiation. It's a very, 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 very vicious poison and pernicious. It pervades everywhere. And so they had to come up with ways to manipulate the science, the data, to hide the environmental and human effects. And Galen Windsor is one of the slickest, smoothest, and better funded agents of deceit on the dangers of nuclear power and nuclear weapons, or in other words, ionizing radiation. And he's probably part of the Health Physics Society. He's definitely part of a global network of disinformation people and authorities. And they love these authorities, scientific authorities, whatever kind of authorities that they quote and use all the time. But they're all disinformation, almost all of them. Because I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I can assure you it's very, very difficult to get the voice of truth out there. And so I want to thank you, Desiree and Biggie, for doing this very, very brave and very, very important broadcast, and continually doing it to the public to inform them, educate them, and inform them, which empowers them. And then they begin to find their own answers. But someone like Galen Windsor is very, very confusing. He confuses a lot of people. He's very slick and he's very convincing. But once you look at the science, it doesn't support what he's saying. And there is a whole history, there's a whole paper trail of scientific research, even by the nuclear weapons labs and the nuclear power industry themselves, that do not support what they're saying, and that it's safe. So that's my comment on Galen Windsor. And Chris Busby is a disinformation agent. We now know he has always been funded by Sir Jimmy and Teddy Goldsmith, who started the Ecologists. And after Fukushima happened, he turned. And he said to me on the phone during a conversation, we were very good friends. His son came and stayed with me in Berkeley while he was a student. And I know the family very well. And right after Fukushima happened in September, I'll never forget this conversation of 2011, Busby said to me, "Oh, well, my great-great-great-grandfather was the CEO of Dope Incorporated in Hong Kong. So that's Jardine and Matheson, that's the Bank of Hong Kong, that's the global drug network that the Jesuits operate in and out of China. That was the cause of the Vietnam War, the war in Cambodia, the Afghan war. This is all drug wars. Even the Ukraine has an aspect of drug racketeering tied to the oligarchs, tied to the really big criminals, the mafia, the Russian mafia, the Ukrainian mafia, the Eastern European mafia, and the global mafia, because it's all unified now and it's one mafia."
Oh, wow. Well, what you say reminds me of two things. Technocracy is something that existed in the 1930s, and then it sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
And I had an interview with Patrick Wood, the author of this book, technocracy rising, the Trojan horse to global transformation. And he explains in this book very succinctly that economics, religion, education, anything you can think of, healthcare, everything is being turned into a scientism dictatorship. And scientism means it's not real science. They pretend that it's science. So Al Gore can say idiotic things about global warming. Yeah, right. And everybody in that league follows him. But you can't repeat a lie, but it will never become the truth, of course. And as far as Galen Windsor is concerned, with his message that nuclear power is fantastic and that you can do wonderful things with it, normal people like you and me with a heart and a conscience and love, they want to believe him because that is the better message, of course. And so many people deny what they see in front of their eyes when one such guy like Galen Windsor tells them what they really want to hear, because then they can feel safe. But there is no safety, people, in this world. Not anymore.
There's no safe radiation. It's all damaging. And even at the lowest levels, very, very low levels, are more dangerous. They are more poisonous. They are more lethal than at higher levels, believe it or not. And that's because at very low levels, when the atoms eject the energy from the nucleus as an alpha particle or gamma rays or X-rays or whatever, the free radicals that form along the path of those ejected particles of energy or rays of energy, those free radicals cannot find a partner. They're electrons that need a pair. It's like a dance couple. And so they steal them from the molecules in the cell that make life possible and compromise this living system. And so at higher levels of radiation exposure, there are a whole lot more of these free radicals available for the electrons to partner with. And so the danger, the damage that they do is less per unit of radiation than for ultra low and extremely low levels of radiation exposure. I'm talking about internally. So what you think is scientifically sound is not necessarily. You have to go to the actual scientific constraints, and you have to study the materials that you're talking about and you're working with or you're exposing people to or you're being exposed to, because the scientific constraints are where you have to start. That is what is possible scientifically and what is not possible scientifically. It's not an opinion. It's been a proven hypothesis found to be true and repeated over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's universal. So people don't understand when they're talking about opinions and what they think or their impression or they're untrained or whatever. They don't understand that there are scientific rules that cannot be violated. And that's where you have to stop when you're explaining things to the public. And then after a while, people begin to understand and they start using it themselves, and then we're all on the same page.
Yes, people need to be taken by the hand to explain the steps that you make in science and the repeat of the experiments, because that is the only way that you can really be sure that it is like the way you think it is. Like you start with the hypothesis and then you know either way it works or it doesn't work.
Right.
But yeah, there is a lot of scientism going on also, for instance, in the vaccination arena, because when you use a placebo that is not a saline solution, but you use another vaccine as a placebo, what are you doing? Yeah, you're cooking the books. And
Well,
that's not science.
when you see, as we're seeing now, this emergence over maybe the last 50, no, well, it would be since World War II, since the atomic bomb. But when you're seeing this pattern, and we're seeing a pattern, it's a universal pattern, it's all over the world, it's happening at the same time, in the same way, in many countries. That means it's a template. There's one source for it. So where did this, who is this source? What is this source? And why are they there? Why are they doing this? Because the chemtrails, the vaccinations, the the manipulation and the destruction of food and our diet, and the removal of essential nutrients from our diet, from our food stream, such as iodine. The intake of iodine in Americans has declined 80% in the last 20 years. Now, Americans didn't take iodine out of their food, out of their diet. Every cell in our body needs iodine.
Yeah.
And it also controls and synchronizes our endocrine system. The endocrine system runs the whole body. It coordinates all of the processes that make life possible in the body. So the endocrine system is messenger molecules that tell different parts of our body, our cells or whatever, when to do what, whatever. And that makes life possible. So we're seeing this total disruption of all the processes and the elements and the components and the trace elements and the food and everything, even the psychological conditioning, the neuro-linguistic programming, all of it is all coming from one source, and it's the Jesuits. And the Jesuits are rebranded ancient Iranian tribes that I've been talking about in my interviews. And they are Zoroastrian and Mithra worshippers. And they have been running and controlling everything on this planet for at least the last 3,000 years. That's really hard to believe because they're very well hidden and very few people know about them. They think they're Catholic monks and part of the Vatican and part of the Catholic Church. They're not. They're a standalone, stand-free army of atheists. They don't even believe in God. They are not Catholics. They wear Catholic robes and they masquerade as Catholic priests, but they are actually Iranian tribes from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan.
It's all fear and hypnosis. Yeah.
Yes, and they always were very rich because they created the silk brocades and the silk damasks and the beautiful silks that they sold along the Silk Road from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. All across Eurasia, they made the finest silks of all. The Chinese, the Mongolians, everybody got their silk from the best silk from these Iranian tribes. And so they've always had lots of money. They know how to make money. They know how to hold on to it. And they were in particular extremely cruel as well.
Yeah.
Especially the Meds, MEDES. And that particular tribe was the most cruel. And they are still running the top of the Jesuits along with other tribes like the Pahlavi tribes, and there are many of them. I've lived in Iran and met them, and I love Iran. I love Iranians. I don't like what these top groups are doing, but they stand aside. They're not part of the tribes of Iran now. they oversee them, they dominate them, and they control them. But these Iranian tribes at the top of the Jesuits are pure and simple criminals. They're ruthless, totally criminal actions. And they very early discovered that poisons were very good for doing assassinations. They created the Dark Ages. Um, Even Genghis Khan used to capture marmots that had plague and other diseases, and he would take them and throw them into populations or towns or villages that he wanted to conquer because the people would not succumb to him or they resisted him or whatever. So if they did not capitulate to Genghis Khan and other Central Asian leaders, then they would be killed. They would be poisoned. They would be diseased or whatever. And so all of the diseases, the pathogens, the metals, the radiation that are put in the chemtrails now and other chemicals, um, the radiation contaminating the global atmosphere from Fukushima and nuclear power plants and nuclear bomb testing. It's all part of the Jesuit agenda of depopulating the world. And the main two ways of doing it, the most effectively and the most globally and the most invisibly and undetectably, is through atmospheric bomb testing and nuclear power. So you see, these poisons interact with all other poisons and multiply the effects of each other. So what they're doing is dogpiling humanity, dogpiling the biosphere with many poisons that act like vectors from many directions and multiply the effects of each other. And there's no way to get away from it. How do we get away from this? We filter our water with reverse osmosis filter systems. But then how do you filter dairy products? You can't. So you have to purchase your dairy products from countries that have much lower radiation levels. And that would be the Southern Hemisphere, in particular South America. But they are so thorough with the HARP system and with the ability to use nature to redirect Fukushima radiation. They could deliver it to Europe, to Southeast Asia, to Antarctica. Anywhere.
It's like they drop it here or there or there.
Yes. They'll send it down through these directed plumes of cold air coming from the Pacific and full of Fukushima radiation. And I've seen them do it. It's just all fluid dynamics. They direct them using HARP down to New Zealand, and then they poison Australia. This is in one trip. And then the plume goes on over India and the Himalayas into the Caspian Sea and Black Sea region, and then into Europe. And they are poisoning specific populations and targeting specific countries that have geopolitics that the international financiers don't like. And so when the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant blew up because they put MOX fuel, mixed plutonium, uranium oxide fuel, in the reactors in Ukraine, and one of them blew up and this was a Chernobyl-sized event on November 27th of 2014. It just happened before Christmas. And then it blew up again on December 3rd, and then it blew up again on December 28th, and then another reactor in a different nuclear power plant in the Ukraine blew up on December 30th. And on December 30th, the Prime Minister Yatsenyuk of Ukraine announced that he was buying all nuclear fuel in the future for the 4 reactors in Ukraine from Westinghouse He didn't say it was the MOX fuel, but we're going to have more Chernobyls coming out of Ukraine that affects the whole world if we don't do something about this. And that's why I've been speaking out publicly so loudly, because the Russian scientists are also saying the same thing. They're warning the world that
Yeah.
these Chernobyls are going to come out of the Ukraine if they're not stopped.
Yeah. Yeah. Today I was at a meeting of people in the Netherlands who have websites with critical commentaries and so on. And so from time to time we sit together and we talk about what we have been finding and then what we are working on. And there is this one guy who worked at a nuclear facility in the Netherlands, and it is totally interesting what he says, that from the word go, these nuclear facilities had problems. There were hairline damages. No, it was all pure and fine. No, it was damaged from day one.
It's all booby-trapped. It's a Rube Goldberg machine. A Rube Goldberg machine is something that messes up, that malfunctions. It continues malfunctioning. It continues releasing poisons. Everything in our global infrastructure now is also exposed to the Wigner effect, which is the brittleization of metal from being bombarded with radiation. And this is exactly what I was talking about in the cell, where the radiation, the energy is ejected from the nucleus of the atom, and it's alpha particles, gamma rays, X-rays, but also these gamma rays are basically electrons that are unpaired, and electrons need to be paired to balance themselves, balance their energy flow. And so they have to steal an electron from the molecules in the cell. Well, what happens when these gamma rays hit a metal surface, the metal matrix on the atomic matrix on the surface, they have to steal an electron from that metal surface, and that causes all kinds of problems, embrittlement of the metal. It causes weakening of the metal, the integrity of the metal matrix. It causes cracking and all kinds of problems that are causing the disintegration of our entire infrastructure globally. And that's why we're having so many emergency landings with airplanes. We're having pilots falling asleep or having heart attacks in the cockpit. This is from the same effect in the cells, and it's a breakdown of the atomic infrastructure of human beings and living things
and material,
non-living things, bridges, airplanes, especially thin metal is particularly prone to the Wigner effects. And so the things on airplanes that are breaking are the hydraulic system. Those were the earliest complaints. Planes having to drop to land, especially in the Pacific, because most of the radiation is coming from Fukushima now. And so planes flying through this contaminated air column are having accelerated Wigner effects. And so planes couldn't get their hydraulic system to put the landing gear down, or they had problems getting it up. So they were landing on islands, making emergency landings in Guam, in Hawaii, wherever they could land to do repairs. And then what happened is the lithium batteries on planes started exploding and starting fires in the planes. Now the wings are falling off. All of this is accelerating, and where the wings are attached to the plane, right on the top of the fuselage. That load from the wings, even though they're buttressed and everything, um, that is pulling or stressing the top of the fuselage on top of the plane, and so the wings are falling off in flight. Or even passengers are, they videotape, one passenger videotape, he heard the snapping sound, and all of the rivets that were holding the panels on the inside of the cabin started coming out. And the he called the stewardess or the flight attendant, and she looked at it and emailed the pilot, and he said, oh, it's not a big deal. But then pieces started falling off the plane on the
Not a big
outside
deal.
flight. So she emailed the captain in the cabin, and again he said, I'll come out and look at it. And so he came out and he went, oh. And then he went back into the cockpit. He did not land the plane. He continued on to Texas and landed it safely. But now it's so severe, especially German pilots flying in the North Atlantic are dying like flies. They're having heart attacks at very high rates. The cabin crew is sick. The radiation levels are increasing in the atmosphere. The concentrations are going higher, and that accelerates all of these effects. So we're in a global disaster, and most people don't even know it. And it's
No.
the most serious disaster that humanity has been exposed to.
It never happened before.
Man-made.
Yeah. And what I see with what you said about the radiation, the chemtrails, the vaccines, they're weaponizing our own bodies against ourselves.
And if you look at who's manufacturing them, who's doing the research, where are these agendas coming from, you can trace it all to the Jesuits and those top families. They are the Farneses, the Aldobrandinis, the Orsinis, the Gigis, the Colonnas, the Pallavicinis. All of these families have been around forever, and many of them were papal families. They were popes of Rome. They worshiped Zoroastrianism and Mithra, but they will adopt or take on falsely any religion as a cover.
Yeah. Behave as if. By the way, Jenner was also Jesuit trained, and he lived in a mansion.
Who?
Jenner, Edward Jenner, from the cowpox vaccinations, one of the foundations under the vaccine agenda. He was Jesuit trained, and he lived in a mansion. So two red flags.
He was probably a Rothschild or from one of these Jesuit, top Jesuit families.
Yeah.
Fidel Castro is one of them. Leon Panetta, who was Secretary of Transportation under Clinton, and then he was appointed chief of the CIA under Obama, and he served there 2 years, and then he went on to be Secretary of Defense. Obama appointed him Secretary of Defense, and then he retired. Well, guess who Leon Panetta really is? He's really a Habsburg prince from a princely family. He is an Uzbek. He still has the Uzbek nose, the Uzbek eyes. And just at the right time in the right photo, you can see he's clearly an Uzbek. I took a photo of him to a bunch of Iranian friends of mine, and I said, do you see an Uzbek nose on him? They said, oh God, yes, he's an Uzbek. Look at his nose. And so they confirmed it, and they said also Stalin was an Uzbek. Stalin was Iranian. He was from the Gilan province in the southeast corner of the Caspian Sea in Iran. Now, Ataturk. Now, this this Iranian bloodline is matrilineal. It goes through the females, the mothers in the breeding pair. And they have very strict breeding programs. But
Yeah.
let's go back to Panetta and who he really is. Panetta means someone who sells bread in the streets. And I said, nah, he's not someone who was from a family who sold bread in the streets. So I found out his father had been born in a big city that was part of the Habsburg Empire, and then later part of the Bourbon Empire,
Okay. Yeah.
the Bourbon dynasty, and 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 I said, well, that's interesting. That sort of indicates, it confirms that Leon Panetta is tied to the Habsburg Empire and the Bourbons. And so I investigated more and discovered his father had moved to, as a young adult, to a small village, which is the headquarters of the Ndrangheta crime family, mafia family. And interestingly, it's one of only two places in the world where they grow the bergamot fruit or citrus, which is like an orange, but it's the oil, the essential oil, is used in the most expensive perfumes in the world, and it's also the flavoring in Earl Grey tea. That is the bergamot orange that gives uh, uh, Earl Grey tea that sort of lavender flavor. It's not lavender; it's bergamot. It's very different.
Oh,
And
yeah.
recently, I've been able to buy fresh bergamot oranges in Berkeley. There's one grocery store run by a Japanese family, and the produce is half of the whole store because the Japanese love produce. And there's some farmer in Fresno growing bergamot oranges and selling them in California, and it's just such a luxury to have it. But going back to Leon Panetta's father, every male in that village must be a member of the Ndrangheta. And so then I looked up more names for Panetta, and that's not the original name. He did have the last name of a Iranian bloodline, Uzbek bloodline family that lived in Italy on the border of Austria with very, very strong ties to Vienna. And Leon Panetta was actually reorganizing the Ndrangheta mafia family to be a worldwide organization, and he took it out of the mafia crime family of related members, actually bloodline related, to an international model like the Medellin cartel or the Mexican drug cartels. And it is the Ndrangheta crime family that I saw in photographs that I was looking for photographs of other Panettas from that village, and I discovered two, and they were both sitting in the back of police cars in Italy with their hands in handcuffs behind them on drug charges. So that family is definitely involved in drug trafficking, also human trafficking, and the Ndrangheta has been identified in official investigations of King Albert of Belgium in the hunting parties that he held on his estates, on his castle estates and chateau estates, and also Queen Beatrice's estates. They have held those human hunting parties of teenagers. And it was the Ndrangheta that were identified in these official investigations of these hunting parties, where these young teenage children are drugged up, and then the Ndrangheta took them out of juvenile delinquent um, institutes and programs, and took them to be hunted naked in the woods, all drugged up, raped, sodomized, and then they're shot dead by the hunters. And the hunters were identified as Prince Rizzo, his wife, Princess Mabel, George Soros, King Albert, and there were other people involved too, such as the head, I believe, of the Brussels. I'm sorry,
The EU?
the Belgian Parliament,
Oh, I see. Yeah,
as
yeah.
well as other politicians and big players. And this sodomism and this satanic
It's everywhere.
form of I don't know what you call it, satanic fun or something, but
Yeah.
very, very widespread globally. George Soros and George H.W. Bush have been extremely involved in it. King Albert and the Dutch Crown have been extremely intensely involved in it, and the Ndrangheta, of course, as well. So it's organized crime working for and with the military for the ruling royal families and the oligarchs.
Yeah, it's
It's
almost too much to take in this for
uh,
people. I've heard these stories before, and yeah, I'm afraid it's true because one of the people in our meeting today, he has been investigating different things and came to this same club of people with the
the
Dutroux, the Dutroux affair.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
yeah, so it is very intertwined all over the world, and it's a very insidious satanic illness, you could say.
and it's associated with power. And I realized when I worked in the Livermore nuclear weapons lab, things like that were going on: sexual perversion,
Yeah.
uh, murders, drugs, all kinds of stuff. It was a very, very crazy place. It's crazier now. And I just didn't like it. I couldn't stand the atmosphere. But that's when I discovered that as you move up on the power ladder, you get to a certain point where you don't go any further. There's a glass ceiling there unless you join these
Yeah.
homosexual, satanic, perverted sexual activities, and it's so that they can blackmail you.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah,
It's all for control. And
yeah,
so if you go higher in their power structure and you learn more about the illegal activities and how they're doing it, you have to be controllable. And the way they do that is with all this sexual perversion,
yeah,
money perversion. It's all corruption.
yeah. Well, and I've spoken with two ladies in the Netherlands who had been, as a child, victim sexual slaves, and one of them was Lucio Groen, and she was an elderly lady when I spoke with her. And at some point in her life, she had married, and then the memories came oozing out from all the dark places in her mind. And then she told me she had been visiting with her husband all the places that she could remember, and every detail she had given beforehand, like a corridor under the soil or whatever, it all was correct. So she had this memory of everything that had happened to her, and she checked it in reality, and it was totally perfect what she said. And the other lady is a younger woman, and she found another victim, and now together these ladies are trying to heal each other, so to speak, by getting the memories out and neutralizing them, so maybe one day they can have a more or less normal life.
Well, secrecy. secrecy when a child is being um, sexually predated or sexually abused in a family, it's almost always by a family member. It's
Yeah.
very, very common that it's a multi-generational and then it's a family member. Now, Prince Friso and Princess Mabel were involved in this, and obviously it's multi-generational in the Dutch royal family.
Yeah, must.
Princess Mabel was involved with one of the biggest drug dealers in Holland before she met Prince Friso. And Prince Friso came to the University of California, Berkeley for a year. Also, the Crown Prince of Norway was here. I don't know if it was at the same time, I doubt it. But when they were here, I can guarantee they were introduced to the Bohemian Club. It's just riddled with pedophilia and with homosexuality and all kinds of other um, sexual activities that are exotic.
Yeah.
And uh, the pedophile rings, these homosexual rings, they're all politicized in Berkeley, the University of California. And they have breeding programs, special breeding programs for students. They don't even know that they're being introduced for the purpose of this breeding program. It's all very secret. But you know, Skull and Bones started the University of California and all of the land grant colleges, the state universities and everything. And so the state universities in the United States were set up by the ruling elite, by Skull and Bones with ties to Europe, um, to train workers for the workforce. And the people who own the factories and the institutions and run the government of that need this workforce are the ruling elite, and they're trained in the private universities like Harvard and Princeton and Yale and places like that. The Ivy League colleges, mostly on the East Coast. And my daughter went to freshman orientation at the University of California, Davis, a few years ago. And she came back and she said, Mom, they told us we're not there to get an education. This is at freshman orientation. They told us we're there to get trained for the workforce. So you see, we're just really still fancy slaves and
Yeah.
accumulate wealth over our lifetime. But all of that is stripped from every generation in the United States and everywhere around the world with world wars or droughts or natural disasters that with HARP are not natural. They can trigger them, the military can. And so it's just a gigantic pump and dump system run by these top level Iranians who strip the wealth of every generation, and no one ever sees that money again. But after 40,000 years of human life on this planet, 85% of the world population owns nothing.
Yeah.
Owns
Wonder why?
nothing.
Wonder why?
I
Yeah.
wonder why. Yeah.
Strange. Yeah. Well, you say they being trained for the workforce. That is what the Common Core now in America, the educational system is all about. It's outcome based, and I have been Charlotte Isabit. She explains how when 11 people want to become a welder and there is only 10 places, then the 11th person can forget it. He will never be trained to be a welder, period.
That's right.
And they are crazy.
They quit even teaching those skills in high school.
Yeah. Because, it's very narrow based all.
Very selective.
Yes, yeah.
Very
And
selective.
I see the same thing here in Holland. I mean, educational system, it's a scream, really. And I can see my mother was born in 1906, and her education was way better than mine.
Much
She knew
better.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let me tell you, I went to the University of California, Davis, in the 60s, and the tuition was $65 a year. I have worked and paid for all of my degrees myself because I could afford to. And
Yeah.
I
Now,
worked part time. It's called um, student work study programs, and the university campuses will hire students part time to work in laboratories and do other things on the campus. And a lot of students were able to work their way through. But do you know what the tuition is today at the University of California? And there are battles going on every year because the tuition keeps going up. The tuition for the University of California is over $15,000 a year now. And
that's
that is just the tuition. That doesn't cover the books. Some books are $300 a piece. And it doesn't cover the living costs. The rent in the Berkeley area for an apartment is easily $2,500 a month.
oh my God.
That sometimes there will be 10 Asian students living in an apartment
Yeah.
together, and they're sleeping all over the living room and on couches, and maybe there are only one or two bedrooms. Those are shared by two or three students. Um, it's horrendous. Next door, there's a house that's rented out. I think it has 5 bedrooms. Well, there are two or three students in each bedroom, and each of those students, they told me, were paying $1,000 each a month to live there.
That's horrendous. Yeah.
And so you see, um, there's a filtering program going on also that makes the selection of wealthier and out of state and foreign students more attractive for the university to admit them, because for out of country foreign students, the tuition is like $50,000 a year. It's a huge amount. Well, for graduate students, it's not such a problem, because if the professor really wants a particular student, they pay that tuition. It's built into their grants, and these students are just slaves, research slaves.
Ah,
And,
yeah.
and frequently their intellectual material is stolen from them by the professor. The students do not need the professors and the classrooms, they just don't know it. The real university is not in the classroom, it's not the professor, it's in the library.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely right. Well, what you say that stuff is stolen from students by professors, that is what happened to Candace Pert.
Yes, and
Yeah.
not only that, the funding for science is the greatest income, the greatest revenue stream for the university. And today, at least 52% of the funding in science comes from the military. So now we have students creating databases for drafting humans, tracking systems that are funded by DARPA, the military funding organization that does research. And the students are working on creating these vaccines. They don't know it, but they're working on related research. Sometimes they do know it.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it's 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 just
It's all in compartments.
it's
They
a,
don't know.
it's compartmentalized,
Yeah.
and George Soros is funding through his Open Society Foundation foreign students from selected countries that the New World Order and the Americans and Soros and the Rothschilds want to take over these countries. So these students are teachers in the teaching profession. They're invited by the George Soros Foundation to study at Berkeley, for instance, and maybe there are a couple of hundred of them each spring. I don't know how many in total. But the department receives $1 million from the George Soros Open Foundation for accepting a student and from a foreign country on this George Soros Open Society program. And the students get a new computer, they get more money than they've ever had. They have classes that they go to and they have to write a paper that is published. But the students were shopping the whole time. They said, oh, they don't care if we don't come to the classes. They just want the money.
Yeah.
They just want us, and they want us to write papers. But the students have no idea how to write a scientific level quality paper. They're just ordinary teachers, or maybe they're in the humanities or something in their own countries. But their mentor or professor who supervises them writes the paper and publishes it and puts their name on it.
Oh, wow. What a scam.
So these students are completely immersed with this money. They're encouraged to go shopping, in other words, to be contaminated with the American style. They buy blue jeans and Gap clothes and all the brands, and they take on the American persona and look, and they go back to their country and they tell all the young students about it, and they sell America to the young students. And then these result in the students in the color revolutions who have overthrown their own governments. The Green Revolution in Iran, the Orange Revolution in the Ukraine, the Tulip Revolution in, I believe, was Kyrgyzstan. The Occupy movement in the United States is one of George Soros funded occupation or overthrow regimes. And now the United States is being overthrown by the very students and people who participated in the Occupy movement just 2 years ago. So
you can compromise a whole generation by 1 year of education.
They are hijacking our children and stealing them. And it's not just the money and the shopping and adopting the American lifestyle. It's neuro-linguistic programming, and it's being done through antennas that the University of California transmits into all the neighborhoods where the students live close to the campus. It's in the police antennas. It's in the county regional emergency response antenna system. And guess where it is in this county, Alameda County, where Berkeley is? It's on the grounds within the security perimeter of the Lawrence Livermore lab. That's where the county emergency network is, the antenna headquarters. And that's where mind control was developed at the Livermore lab. And UC Davis, where they have the monkey colony. So you see, these are all integrated systems. This is a stealth takeover of the world. It's funded, and the agenda has been presented to this secret network in universities, governments, politicians, teachers, and it's all coming from the Jesuits.
And it's very long-term planning.
Very long-term planning. They wanted to do this 1,000 years ago. They had to develop the technology.
Yeah.
And the technology of nuclear energy, discovering that, which started in the 1800s and accelerated in the 1900s, and the development of HARP, which is waveforms. All matter is either matter, everything in the universe is either matter or it's in waveforms. energy or matter, and it can convert back and forth. So that's what HARP is about. It's about manipulating the energy in our bodies, in our minds, our thoughts, the energy of the universe within throughout our world in natural systems. They can now artificially trigger something like the Fukushima disaster, which released the equivalent energy that a million Hiroshima or Nagasaki bombs would release. And that's just with the Tromsø, Norway HARP facility. We began kind of there. That's what caused the Fukushima earthquake.
How did that work?
Well, they transmitted the waveforms into the fault zone in Japan from Norway, and it's called over the horizon radar.
Okay, yeah.
They put chemtrails up, and so the radar travels in a straight line, but what they do is bounce it off of these chemtrail magnetic mirrors and drop it back down to the ground where it's picked up and retransmitted and bounced off another chemtrail mirror until it gets to Japan. And then they beam it from the ionosphere down into the fault zone, and they boil the water in water pockets that are in the fault zone, and that causes steam, which expands hundreds of times, and it pushes the fault faces apart, loosens it up, and then they hit it for 2 days with a frequency that was from Gakona, Alaska, the HARP facility up there that the U.S. ran. And that triggers the earthquake. And that caused the Fukushima earthquake.
Yeah.
And the earthquake caused the tsunami.
Yeah, that's the order of things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And well, Jesuits, these Iranian families, excuse me just for a minute, these Iranian families, these bloodlines are very pure. For thousands of years, they've bred very carefully. And they always were interested in science because it made money. And they were in particular interested in waveforms. This is for 3,000 years. So I can guarantee that the concept of HARP came from those top Jesuits.
Okay, yeah, very well possible. Well, I'm wondering now, because of the book of Technocracy, how many people in the Trilateral Commission are Jesuit trained?
Oh, probably most of them.
Probably, yeah.
Yes. And the Rothschilds would not just be Jesuit trained, they have always served the Jesuits. They came out of Germany, out of Frankfurt, Germany. They took over the banking centers, or they made their presence there. And Amstel Meyer Rothschild had 5 sons and 5 daughters.
Yeah.
And they shared a house on Hudenstrasse, Jew Street, in Frankfurt with the Schiff. And as you know, you may not know, but after Al Gore did this big propaganda campaign globally, falsely promoting a fraudulent climate warming. He was released, and his daughter was allowed to marry a Schiff. So he is officially now part of his grandchildren are Schiff Rothschild.
Yeah. You know, I always have to laugh a bit because Al Gore, you know what that means in Dutch?
No.
Already dirty.
Oh, that can't be an accident.
That's funny. Yeah.
Oh, and it was the Rothschild contacts who funded Al Gore's father and Al Gore as senators in Congress.
Yeah.
So they had sponsorship.
Yeah. Oh, well, oh, nothing is normal in this world, right?
Well, it's normal. We just don't think that that is normal. But actually, all this disaster is normal. It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
what they do is they erase everything. They destroy all the libraries. They steal them and burn the rest of the books they don't want. They completely wipe the slate clean of
Yes,
knowledge,
yeah, yeah.
and then they start over again. They were the Etruscans when
Mm,
they harvested the Etruscan culture and empire. They razed it to the ground and they rebuilt the Roman Empire. That's why Romania is called Romania. The Romans came from there. But guess what? They wore Mithra hats because they were Iranians. They were Iranians in Central Asia.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, if you really look very into the details, then you come to these sort of conclusions. I understand it. Yeah, it's intriguing. Yeah.
And so then when I realized that Stalin was one of these Iranian families, I said, well, who else came into power at that time? The 1920s and the 1930s, there was a huge sea change of everything. And
Mm,
it was a big shift. And I said, well, Ataturk Ataturk came into power at that time. So I looked up his family, and sure enough, his mother was from an Iranian tribe very close to where Stalin came from.
oh, bingo again.
Yeah. So you get a few clues, and then you start putting two and two together and doing
Yeah,
some critical thinking and associating things you didn't know were connected.
yeah,
And what I'm trying to do, Desiree, is to present the overall picture for this puzzle that we live in.
yeah,
And once a child or an adult has a frame for a puzzle, they can take the pieces that seem unrelated and place them in their proper place in that puzzle to
yeah,
create the real picture.
yeah,
And that's what critical thinking does. That's what broadcasting good information does. And people, I know they recognize the truth because I will get large numbers of viewers on particular interviews that I do that go up on YouTube.
yeah,
And they will go back and watch the interviews three, four, five times, they've told me, because each time they learn new things from it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it's because I present information at different levels from different sources and to a very varied audience with different experiences and knowledge bases. And so they finally discover that, and I know I learned the same way. I'll start out with just a simple question. And then as I pursue it, it gets more and more entangled and more interesting,
yeah.
and I can't let go of it. I know it happens to you too.
And that's so intriguing to do that sort of research. I know. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so exciting and
yeah.
empowering, and it's a great, huge impact on humanity if you present it correctly.
Bring it out into the light. That's the only thing that we can do. Yes, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm trying to do the same in my areas, and well, it works. I must say. I don't know whether that is your experience, but more and more people react positively when I casually drop something just to feel the bathwater, and often I get positive responses from people that I think, "Oh, wow, you know this already? Whoa,
Yeah,
good."
and what happens is, as you and I do our research, and other people do, and we begin to know more, we become more self confident. We
Yeah,
become more scientifically confident. And even without us realizing it, we are projecting that when we present information to the
I
public.
agree totally. Yeah,
And
yeah,
people know when you're telling the truth, they know when you're comfortable talking about it and presenting it. and they know you're right. I sometimes people I've had anchors or radio or TV hosts blow up when I said certain things, and I'll start laughing. I don't get excited or defend it or fight with them. I just say, in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years down the road, or maybe 2 weeks or 2 hours, you're going to validate and verify that what I've just said is true. And then you will call me or contact me and say, Leuren, you were right. And I said, that's happened many times. But right now, you don't have enough information.
Exactly.
You're not informed well enough to understand that what I'm saying is true. And my God, one radio interviewer, he said, but I know this, and I'm this can't be true, and I love Bertrand Russell, and he's the greatest philosopher in the world, in the 20th century, and this and that. And he called me back an hour after the interview, and he flew up at me on the radio program live, and he apologized to me. He said, I talked to someone I trust as much as I trust myself. And he said that what you said is true.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm sorry to have shocked you and everything, but I knew that it was true. I won't say things unless I have them well documented, and I know
exactly. Yeah.
And but I said I sure didn't expect to hear from you within an hour of the program.
That was fast, yes. Yeah. But one thing also is when you have done your homework, when we have done the research, when we have really looked at something, then you can present it without emotion, but also without ego. It doesn't matter because you know, and that's all that's needed, right?
Well, because we have no power, Desiree. It's the information that has the power.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so once you realize that, we're just messengers. We're not anybody. We're not
exactly.
We're not we're not anything. It's information, and that's why they fight us so hard, and why they fight the information even harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why people like Royal Raymond Reich and all the other ones end up in psychiatric institutions and die poor and disillusioned.
They lock them up.
I swore that's not going to happen to me this time.
No, it's not. No. It's not.
No.
But it's becoming more difficult to tell the truth. And I think one of the reasons that people haven't, I have been harassed and attacked and everything, but nobody really challenges me now because I'm very careful about what I say. And when I write an article, sometimes if it's a long one, I'll have 100 references on it with links so people can go and investigate themselves right in the original sources. I'm not hiding anything from anybody. I'm not telling any lies. In fact, Mark Twain said very famously, well, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
And after all, has to make sense.
Yeah. So, Mark Twain had a few of these expressions that I like very much. Yes.
Yes, he was an interesting guy, and he certainly had been around the world, and he knew a lot. He met a lot of people. He had great insights, and he was a wonderful writer, of course.
Yeah.
But my favorite scientists, two of them, Milankovitch, who was a mathematician, and he calculated the glacial and interglacial periods that are part of the natural cycles on the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to determine that the glacial periods and interglacial periods on this Earth the ice ages, in other words, are related to the geometric configuration of the Earth with respect to the Sun. So the Earth orbiting around the Sun is not a circular orbit, it's an elliptic orbit.
Yeah.
So there are periods when the Earth is further from the Sun, and there are periods when it's closer to the Sun. And those drive the Earth into and out of ice ages. And the periodicity is about 250,000 years for that cycle. Then the tilt of the axis of the Earth, the wobble, Chandler's wobble, the wobble of that axis as the Earth is spinning around it. And then there's another factor I've forgotten. Anyway, there are four that create different patterns of and time differences, the periodicity for the ice ages going in and out of them. And we're very deep in an ice age now. There's no global warming going on. There is local warming going on that occurs naturally anyway. But the overall trend, if you look at the heat budget of the whole Earth instead of just one little mountain or mountain peak or mountain range, is I'm sorry, I just lost my.
Well,
the heat budget overall for the Earth indicates that we're in an ice age, and there are warming periods, but that's all natural. But what the liars are doing, the manipulators, the deceivers, the disinformation people about climate change. This is the science. What did you call it? The science.
Scientism.
Scientism. Yeah. Right. And what they're doing is going to the Himalayas, or they're going to parts of the ice shelf in the Antarctic or whatever. But they're cherry picking the data.
Yeah.
Where they know what the answer is, and it fits into what they're trying to say and lie about, and then they ignore, for instance, the heat budget of the water vapor. They never even talk about water vapor, and yet that's the greatest heat sink in climate. So they're cherry picking the information. It's not science.
Yeah.
It's political science.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and to manipulate the world into a certain direction. Yes,
well,
and make money.
They're using climate change to sell nuclear power, but actually, nuclear power is a depopulation mechanism, and nuclear power is more expensive than any other form of producing electricity. So what are they using it for? If it costs more, only governments can afford nuclear power. They have to subsidize it. But it's poisoning their whole country, the food, the water, everything, the bodies. It lowers fertility. It does brain damage, so it lowers the IQ. It causes heart attacks and heart problems, ischemic problems and diseases, diabetes, Lou Gehrig's, Hodgkin's, chronic fatigue syndrome, Parkinson's disease. These are all caused by mitochondrial damage by radiation. Yet, no one ever mentions that when they're talking about the real cause of nuclear power. It's the health and the wealth and the future fertility of our children. That's what the real cost is. And there's no way to buy that back, and there's no way to repair that damage. It's permanent in all future generations.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is what makes me so sad, because we try to leave this world to be a better place after we have gone, but these characters, they work totally opposite to all that. And
they're multi-generational.
Yeah. Yeah, and a group that has one idea, and we are all, loose change, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so look at Princess Mabel. She's working for George Soros now.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
destroying the whole planet. And what that indicates also that drug dealer boyfriend of hers,
Yeah.
well,
Klaas Bruinsma.
he was executed or assassinated in front of the uh, what's the hotel in Amsterdam where he was assassinated?
Amstel Hotel? I don't know.
No, the it's an American owned Hilton Hotel.
Oh, Hilton. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He was
Okay.
executed
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
front
Of
of the
course.
hotel. And his lawyer was also Queen Beatrice's lawyer.
Ah.
And Princess, um, the joke about Princess Mabel was that she had slept with every man in Holland.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, when she was presented as bride to one of our princes, I really had this idea. Geez, now I know this family is criminal because you don't invite a character like Mabel into your family, knowing what she has been, the lover of Klaas Bruinsma. Sorry, that for me is a no-no thing.
He
But
was ordered to marry her because when he was here at Berkeley, I think he was bisexual. But what Dutch people wrote when he had that accident in their blogs and everything was that he had been turned into a homosexual during
mm,
his time in Berkeley.
oh,
And he went back to Holland and he was homosexual, but he was told to marry Princess Mabel.
yeah, well, Mabel, she was no princess. She became a princess after marrying him. Yeah. And then Maxima. Did you find out things about Maxima as well? Because she also was dropped upon us.
Yes, Maxima was chosen or selected for many reasons. Number one, she's from Argentina. Number two, her father was a very, very strong, high level fascist, and he was involved in the disappearance of people in Argentina.
Yeah.
That scandal that went on under the whoever the president was. There was a really dark period in Argentine history. And the reason Maxima was selected and married off to Prince, um,
Willem-Alexander.
what's her husband's name?
Willem-Alexander.
Willem, yes. The reason she was married to him was to give the the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch royal family and the Dutch establishment access through um, that that queen of the Dutch, who is actually Argentinian, and so it gives the Dutch access to the mineral rights of Antarctica. And
Uh, yeah.
Argentina has a very large claim, not as big as Norway, because the Norwegian discoverer um, claimed Antarctica for Norway. But uh, the Dutch economy and the Dutch certain privileged Dutch will certainly benefit from mineral exploration and mining in Antarctica because of that marriage.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
she's obviously a fascist. Her father was, she learned at his knee very young. And so she has the right attitude about that, just as Mabel had the right attitude about drugs and drug dealers.
Hmm.
And she, Maxima, um, is is a fascist, and uh, Queen Wilhelmina was married to Prince Bernhard, who was a
No,
fascist.
no, 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 no,
Uh,
no. No, that was Juliana.
I'm sorry, Juliana
Yeah.
was married to uh,
Bernard.
Prince Bernhard. He
Yeah.
was a Nazi prince in a Nazi school, went to Nazi school in Germany.
Yeah.
And Prince Philip of England, the consort of Queen Elizabeth II of England, she she was married to him, and he was also the product of a Nazi school. in Nazi Germany. He was a Nazi prince, and the um, the principal, or the man who owned and started this German school that Prince Bernhard and Prince Philip went to. I think Bernhard went to the same one. He left Nazi Germany and went to Scotland, and he started Gordonston School, which is where all the royals in England are sent before they go to university. So fascism and Nazism is it's the basic fabric of these royal families in England and Holland.
Yeah. Well, I never forget the bland expression on the face of the then Queen Beatrix
Uh-huh.
when on her birthday party, this black car drove in through the public into the penis of Osiris, I call it, in that monument.
The
And
yes.
Maxima and Willem Alexander had this reaction of, gee, what's happening? And Beatrix was like that.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised as, how can that be?
Poker face. She was told ahead of time.
Yeah. Incredible.
It was a false flag.
Apparently.
Do that. But it was a message of some kind.
Yeah, that's what I understood. And then Prince Friso died, so she gets some messages from somewhere. She'd better heed them, I think. Yeah. Amazing.
They're told where their place is. They're not completely free to do anything they want to. Remember, it's the bankers who keep the crowned royals on the throne.
Yes. Yeah.
And protect them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and these banksters, they have this program that they do every 50 years or so, like 1929 and the Krach, and then people build up again and then buff again, get their head off, and that's those cyclical things almost.
Right. And you have to realize that the two top Jesuit money-making endeavors that they're involved in for very huge revenues are drugs and human trafficking, as I mentioned before. So can you imagine how wealthy the British Queen really is and the Dutch sovereign ruler? Because the Dutch East India Company and the East India Company have been involved in drug trafficking and human trafficking since the 15 or 1600s.
Yeah.
That's a very, very long time. People don't even realize how wealthy the Dutch royal family is. They're very, very, very wealthy.
Yeah, it's amazing, and the Dutch people pay for all their expenses. Well, they call them.
Let's look at the Ukraine and what's happened in the last year to what was the richest country in the Soviet Union. It was the Ukraine. These are trained, skilled people. This is where the Rus people came from originally that are now the Russians. And they actually migrated from Scandinavia down into the Kiev area, into the Ukraine. And it was a fabulously rich agricultural area. It's part of the steppe, or the plains, the grasslands that go from Portugal all the way across Eurasia to the Pacific Ocean. And 35% of the black soil, the richest agricultural soil in the world, is in the Ukraine. Can you imagine that 1/3 of the best soil is in the Ukraine? Well, it's because the Black Sea during ice ages and interglacial periods, the ice sheets on the continent of Europe and Central Asia, they when the ice melted, it carried all the sedimentary,
Sediments, yeah.
yeah, and decaying vegetation across the plains of the Ukraine and dropped that rich soil and mineral rich and humus rich soil, kept depositing it. This is for millions of years.
Yes.
So it's not
Well,
just a foot deep. That black soil, that goes probably all the way down to the bottom of the Black Sea.
okay. Well, we have 2 more minutes, so it's
Ah,
difficult to say anything more about Ukraine. Leuren, you have to come back again.
yes. Well, I will just close in saying that the Royal Dutch Shell, has
Yeah.
been drilling illegally and fracking all through this war, in the war zone protected by the Ukrainian government troops. And
Oh,
and
and we can't find the pieces of the plane, but we can frack there?
yeah, and on top of that, in the last couple of days, the Ukraine declined to pay in advance for more natural gas and oil from Russia, and so they went begging all over Europe. And guess who is reverse pumping natural gas to the Ukraine now? They couldn't get it anywhere. Royal Dutch Shell is
Yeah.
reverse pumping gas and oil to the Ukraine. And that reveals who is really involved in the overthrow of the Ukraine. It's the Anglo American, and that includes the Dutch Crown,
Yeah.
Permanent War Crimes Racketeering Syndicate.
I'm afraid we didn't get that on the news. At least I haven't heard it.
Well, it's on our news.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Leuren, it was such a joy again. We are speaking about things that are not joyous at all.
No, but it's what's really happening.
But it's the truth. It's what really is happening, and people need to know. You have to know your enemy.
And we want to both thank Biggie for doing this great service to humanity and for us to make it possible for us to get our message out. So Laurent says thank you.
Thank you.
I say thank you, and Desiree says thank you, Biggie, for what you're doing. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure the Dutch people and all listeners do too.
Well, Laurence, thank you for supporting Leuren. And Leuren, thank you for the cornucopia of information that you gave again this time. And listeners and viewers and Biggie, thank you very much.